Do you believe
No,
do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
Wouldn't you think that she would have yelled out a scream or something if she has bruises on her arm?
Perhaps she made the story up. I think that's what happened.
You tell the Middle East we're not using a nuclear weapon
I would
on
never
anybody.
say that. I would never take any of my cards off the table.
How about Europe? We won't use it in Europe.
I'm not going to take it off the table.
Because he didn't want to raise taxes because he was going to run for president. So instead of raising taxes, he cut back on schools, cut back on highways, cut back on a lot of things. And that's why, Wisconsin has a problem. And you're losing jobs all over the place.
So, Donald Trump's recent gaffes, including comments on abortion and nuclear weapons, his condemnation of Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, show a lack of preparation on the part of his campaign. But it also begs the question, some are asking, is Trump actually trying to lose now? According to the National Review, maybe. They say Trump's been going back and forth for months on running for president. The Washington Post quoted him as saying his decision to run was 50-50. The Review quotes GOP strategist Sherry Jacobs, who says that she thinks Trump is in over his head and that he doesn't really want the nomination because he doesn't want to be savaged by the Clintons if he is the nominee. Jacobs also says that Trump wouldn't mind falling short of the delegate majority to win the nomination because then he gets to play the angry celebrity victim in the coming years. An interesting theory. For more on this now, let's welcome in today's roundtable. Joining us, D.C. McAllister, senior contributor at the Federalist. Also joining us, Ellis Henican, radio and television commentator. Well, guys, I thought I heard all the theories out there, and I have to admit, I thought this myself when Donald Trump had that tirade on stage about Ben Carson and the belt and the psychopath. Of course, now Ben Carson has endorsed Donald Trump, so that goes to show you that we have all misjudged what's happening here. But DC, what do you think about this theory? Now, Donald Trump is facing some headwinds in Wisconsin. He may actually be trying to self-destruct.
I think that's wishful thinking on the part of National Review. I really don't see this as him trying to sabotage his campaign. I think this is just Donald being Donald. He is showing that he doesn't have really the experience to deal with some of these issues. On others, I think that's just him. He's going to be opinionated and stick to it. And since it's not been held against him in the past, he's going to continue on because it hasn't hurt him. And it may hurt him in Wisconsin, but I think he thinks he can just stay strong through the rest of the campaign. I don't think he's sabotaging himself at all. Yeah,
earlier this week we put up a poll. I mean, Donald Trump is now behind Ted Cruz by 10 points in Wisconsin, but he's up by like 30 points in New York, which is where Ellis happens to live right now. Ellis, what do you think about that theory, though, that Donald Trump may realize that the presidency is a pretty tough job after all, and he might not be really into it?
Put it like this, John. If he's trying to lose, he's not doing a very good job of it. I mean, the guy has spent 9 months driving all his opponents crazy and still is very solidly at the top of the Republican lineup. I mean, this guy's not a very good loser in a lot of senses of that term.
Well, we talked about the one pledge that the candidates seem to be backtracking on. But, D.C., there's that famous ATR, Grover Norquist taxpayer pledge, although he always says it's not his pledge. But we all know it's kind of his pledge. But Donald Trump there in an interview is saying that Scott Walker didn't raise taxes, criticizing him for not raising taxes. Also this week, he said that the three main functions of the federal government were security, which, okay, we'll give him that one, but also health care and education. I mean, if he's not trying to lose, I mean, those are things normally, if any other Republican candidate said them, they would be a death sentence.
I know, but he's not thinking about just the conservative voters. I mean, I think it's been pretty much established that he's not a conservative candidate. And I think he's looking beyond just that base. He wants to draw in others. I mean, that actually has an appeal to blue-collar workers and independents and moderates and even some Democrats who said that they might go for Donald Trump. So I think he's not just going to toe the conservative line. I think he's actually looking for a broader appeal, and that actually works for him.
Yeah, and, I don't know why. Maybe I've missed it, Ellis, but I haven't heard John Kasich. I haven't heard Ted Cruz talk about those comments. I mean, Ted Cruz had to defend his wife and all that stuff. But why not play that up? You would think that would have some credo with Republican voters.
All these guys grasp at anything they think that'll work. Listen, Sherry Jacobus is a friend of mine. I mean, she and I have been on dozens and dozens of shows together. But you got to understand a little bit of a backdrop here on this analysis, John. I mean, she has had I don't know, 6 months ago or so, a very public blow up with Donald, where she was interviewing with him as a campaign aide, and somehow or another the conversation went south, and they all ended up saying horrible stuff about each other. So I'm not sure that it's the most disinterested analysis you might find. But listen, these guys, this is desperation hour here, right? I mean, they're all clawing at anything they think it'll work. And the collateral damage has been pretty rough for the party.
And DC, if these poll numbers hold up in Wisconsin, do we even see Donald Trump Tuesday night come out and make a speech, or does he just move on? I mean, it's not like the other primaries of the past, maybe with the exception of Iowa, but it was still early then. This is not like Super Tuesday. You can't hide behind any other victories. He's going to have to talk about Wisconsin, or maybe not.
Well, you're definitely not going to see that presidential press conference that he does when he wins, but I think he'll have to say something. He'll be gracious and he'll move on, because he's really big on moving on from bad statements, controversies, losses, and looking forward and putting a positive spin and moving ahead. But I think you'll hear something, but it will be positive.
Ellis,
he's enough of a businessman and a marketer to know how to do that.
Well, Ellis, I think you even have to admit that the AIPAC speech was a different kind of Donald Trump. He was reading off the teleprompter. He seemed prepared. He seemed serious. Newt Gingrich recently talked about the fact that those are the kind of speeches that Donald Trump needs to be giving now. Do you think that message is getting through to him?
No. I mean, partly it is. Essentially, right, that was the dispute initially between Roger Stone and Trump, right? He was like, listen, just run your Make America Great Again campaign and forget all this ancillary stuff. But I don't know. Donald is both his strength and his weakness is that he's not disciplined. I mean, the fact that he's off message is a big part of what makes people like him. So I don't know if you could put him in a cage and hope that that's going to work. Yeah, and then the Never Trump squad, they always like to point to the fact that these are like 30 or 40% of Republican voters who are voting for them. So theoretically, there are 60% of the Republican Party out there that are willing to vote against Trump. We haven't seen it yet. Will Wisconsin change anything? 20 seconds, DC.
Well, it'll change his chances of getting the majority going into the convention. That's really the big thing about Wisconsin right now. And it'll change the momentum for Ted Cruz going forward so that he can make that dent even bigger going into the convention.
Is there any kind of momentum for Ted Cruz after Wisconsin if the poll numbers do hold up, if he wins by 10 points?
Absolutely. It'll increase his momentum.
Some?
How much, Ellis? How much? Can he cut into the 30-point lead in New York? He's going to bang the drum he's got, and that's the one he has. But seriously, I know this has been a horrible week for Trump, but don't count the guy out. He keeps rising from the dead this Easter season. I'm not counting him out.
We've seen the last of it.
I'm not counting him out. I do think the abortion comment was beyond the pale, and his ability to recover says a lot about where he thinks. He should have just said, look, I don't have an opinion on this yet. I'm changing here. Got a lot to learn. We'll come back. We always have a lot to learn, all of us, including myself. Ellis and DC, stick around. Coming back after this. Welcome back to Newsmax Now. Quick update of your headlines. North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory met with gay rights activists over that bill that was signed into law this week that limits bathroom options for transgender people. Over 100 corporate executives signed a letter urging the governor to repeal the bill. Several companies are now threatening to boycott the state, including A&E Networks, 21st Century Fox, and Turner Broadcasting. Firefighters desperately worked to free a man trapped under a piece of construction equipment in South Florida. That man was eventually freed and flown to the hospital. No word yet on his condition. A severe weather system that produced tornadoes in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama is now moving east towards the Carolinas. Nearly 3,000 people in the Carolinas were without power by this morning. And search and rescue crews enter day two of that search for survivors when that overpass collapsed in India. More than 80 people were injured. At least 24 were killed. Indian police opened a case of culpable homicide against the company that was building that flyover. The 3 construction officials have now been arrested. Archaeologists in Egypt hope more scans will unlock the secrets of Tutankhamun's tomb. They're hoping to reveal the contents of that hidden room that was just found, possibly the final resting place of Queen Nefertiti. All right, back to a roundtable. The top brass of the GOP establishment may be plotting to steal the nomination away from both Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is currently winning the Wisconsin polls, and if he takes the Badger State on Tuesday, that will bring the race just one step closer to a contested convention. Ned RYUN, the CEO of the conservative organization American Majority, tells Breitbart News if there is a contested convention, the establishment will intervene.
Plan that if nobody has the magic number come convention, that they're going to put in place a plan to make sure establishment wins.
Well, Ryan says that if it were to happen, it would be a disaster. The same thing Donald Trump said. Meanwhile, KARL ROVE says the Republican Party should scrap all of the GOP candidates and start with someone new.
Donald Trump excites a lot of enthusiasm, but he also excites a lot of anger within the Republican Party and outside of the Republican Party, and a fresh face might be the thing that could give us a chance to turn this election and win in November against Hillary.
ROVE made those comments during an interview with Hugh Hewitt. I'm not sure what the music was all about there, but let's bring back in our roundtable and discuss all this. For more, DC McAllister back with us again, also Ellis Henican. All right, so this idea that some fresh face is going to emerge from the GOP establishment, this is exactly the type of information that both the Cruz camp and the Donald Trump campaign want out there because they want to fire up the base from the supporters from both those parties. DC, do you buy into this theory that KARL ROVE, maybe he believes it, but I don't know about Ryan. What do you think?
I think there's a very real possibility that the establishment will try to maneuver a brokered convention and get someone else in there besides Ted Cruz and Donald Trump.
We've heard about Paul Ryan. Anybody else you might mention? Any other names out there?
Mitt Romney, I think Jeb Bush originally, but I think Mitt Romney is probably the biggest consideration there.
All right, Mitt Romney is a two-time loser in presidential contests. He's not exactly a fresh face either. Ellis, do you buy into that, Mitt Romney?
It all seems crazy to me.
It does.
I mean, didn't a whole bunch of people just vote all across the country? How on earth do you go look at those people? And particularly if Trump is easily the dominant candidate, how do you tell his people, oh, by the way, KARL ROVE has a better idea than the one that you cast those millions of ballots for?
Not going to fly.
That's got to be the end of the That's got to be the end of the Republican Party as we know it if that happens.
KARL ROVE needs, I think,
Armageddon.
he needs to be a little bit more
self.
self-aware that if anybody is going to make that comment, it sure as hell can't be him, DC.
Really?
I mean, I know he's thinking that. We all know he's thinking that, but he needs to be more, he can't be saying that. Given the support of these Trump folks, they're not going to change their minds. But I don't understand, DC, at this point, and I'll be the first to admit that after Super Tuesday, I said, all right, it's time to come around Donald Trump. He's clearly got all the momentum behind him. The party needs to coalesce and get behind Donald Trump. But, you know, I think after this week, there's a lot of questions out there, certainly about his, you know, you can't be equivocating on these types of things. The Geneva Conventions, nuclear weapons in Japan, of all places, the only place that has ever had nuclear weapons dropped on them, well, in war, not for testing. You can't be equivocating about this stuff when you're actually president of the United States. Why is Ted Cruz now having such a hard time getting people to back him, DC?
Well, I think he's getting more people to back him. I mean, he's doing well in Wisconsin.
He is, but you still have KARL ROVE out there talking about fresh faces.
Because the establishment hates Ted Cruz. They hate Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. I just want to say a little bit about the contested convention. If someone goes into the convention without a majority, Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, by convention rules as it is, and everyone needs to understand this, that after the first ballot, if there is no winner, if there's no majority winner, then on the second ballot, these delegates are unbound. I mean, they are free to vote according to their conscience. I mean, that is legitimate. That is the way the rules function, and that is the right. That's how we function as a representative republic. We are not a pure democracy. Voters do not pick presidents directly. It's an indirect
This is
vote.
true. This is true. In fact,
so,
if you ask most people on the street what kind of governmental system we have, they'll tell you it's a democracy, but it's not a democracy. We live in a republic. Look up the definition of a republic, everybody. Google it and find out what it means. And I was there, Ellis, in Tampa in 2012 when they were voting on these rules. Rule 40B came up. There were a bunch of Ron Paul supporters in the arena, and they booed and they yelled and they cried. That, you know, it was maybe a preview of what we could expect from the Trump supporters. But as DC mentioned, these are the rules that all these guys agreed to when they got into the presidential race. Why do you think Reince Priebus and the RNC is doing a better job of explaining that exact fact? These are the rules. We didn't make these rules up just right now. These are the way the rules have been since August or September or whatever it was of 2012 when we voted on them in Tampa.
Well, because to millions and millions of honest, decent Americans, John, it sounds like a bunch of fancy footwork sophistry, thievery almost. I mean, these people go out and they vote, right? Let me get this straight. They go out and they vote, and then these Sharpies at the RNC are going to find some Rule 47 or 213 and going to say, oh, no. We're not going to listen to your vote. We're going to push it aside and do what we want. Good luck getting those people to turn out and support your phony nominee in November.
There's some precedent here. I mean, you know, look at the 2000
Oh, yeah, there's
election.
thievery
Al
in the
Gore,
past.
Al Gore won the popular vote, but the Electoral College is not the popular
The
vote.
Supreme Court stole it. I mean, come
okay.
on.
All right, we can.
Seriously, John, that is a very. I understand you can find some sharp Ben Ginsburg or some Sharpie lawyer can point to some rule. I'm just saying, you go try and explain that to all those decent Americans who turned out to vote in good faith that you're going to steal their candidate away from them. They're not going to be very happy about that.
What about those superdelegates, Ellis? Come on. I know there's Republicans out there who wish they had superdelegates. That was all concocted after the McGovern disaster.
For another day.
All right.
Debate for another day.
All right.
Stick on this one.
Rain check on that. But DC, I think this is malpractice on behalf of Reince Priebus not to be doing a better job right now. He's talking about unity and all this kumbaya, not doing a better job of saying, look, people, these are the rules. The rules are the rules. I didn't make up the rules. We voted on them. You selected these delegates in 2012 to represent you at the convention, and this is what the delegation did. He's not doing that, and I think it's malpractice on Reince's part.
Well, there's two issues here. First of all, there's just complying with the rules as they are. And the rules as they are, whether you like it or not, is that if there is not a majority vote for one candidate on that first ballot, when it goes to the second, the delegates can vote for who they want. That is the rules as it is. That is how we function. It's how it's been throughout history many years back. So this is just the way it is. That's the rules. The problem is that that's not what the establishment is talking about right now. They're talking about changing the rules on the convention floor so they can bring in another candidate. You mentioned Rule 40B. That says a candidate to be on the ballot must have a majority of delegates in eight states that they want. Kasich would not be that. Cruz will probably get it, and Trump has it right now. So if they throw out that rule, then that would be a different matter. But the thing is,
I think Cruz has the argument there. Cruz, not Donald Trump. But guys, we're out of time, unfortunately. Enjoyed the conversation very much. DC McAllister, Ellis Henican, thanks so much. You guys have a great weekend.